Welcome to the Practice You podcast. My name is Elena Brower. Let's dive into today's conversation regarding life's myriad transitions and how we refine our responses in our relationships, our wellness, our households, our work, and in our practices. You are invited to learn and love and listen with me. Welcome to Practice You. Welcome back to the podcast. I have with me a new friend, a New York friend, a phenomenal human and intuitive healer. Her name is Ebony Banks. Welcome to the podcast, dear one.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you. You're born in Washington, D.C., raised in Silver Spring, Maryland. Mm-hmm. You're an intuitive healer, like I said, who's been aware of your intuition since childhood. And you come from a lineage of healers and wellness practitioners on both sides of your family. Your maternal great-grandma read palms in the 40s, the 1940s. I just wish I had a picture of that woman in front of my face right now.
She's on my Instagram. I actually have a picture of her on my Instagram, and she didn't like pictures at all. So it's like one of two pictures we have of her.
What is your Instagram so our listener can go peeking right now?
Sure. It's at Intuitive Ebony, Eboni Writes, Writes.
Intuitive Ebony Writes, Ebony with an I.
Yes.
Okay. Your late father was a social worker and a hypnotherapist. I have so much respect for that. It helped me stop smoking.
Ooh.
And he operated a private practice mental health clinic. That's a really good father to have. Your inspiration to serve others did begin while you were a child, spending time in your dad's office, observing him doing his healing work. You're also a trauma survivor. So our listener, you can hear some about this coming. You've learned how to use your sort of wealth of inner resources as a result of that to thrive on your own journey. And this is what you teach now. Your main spiritual gift, however, is I would really like for you to share the word out loud, spell it, say it, and then explain it to us exactly what it means, because this word is what made me said yes to having you on the podcast and meeting you.
Oh, I love that. Well, it's clairtangent, CLAIRTANGENT, which means clear touch.
So I want to talk about this in comparison with a couple of different modalities, Reiki and also Satnam or Sayan. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know anything about either.
I know about Reiki.
Okay, good.
I actually learned I was clairtangent, quote unquote, accidentally while being attuned to Reiki.
No way.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Oh, goodness. It's a long story, but, I was going to these spiritual gatherings at a Reiki master's home, and I love her and, trusted her. And one day I made an appointment with her for something other than Reiki. And when I get to her home, she's ready to attune me to Reiki. So I just, went with the flow. I wasn't adamant about, oh, no, I want to have this thing done. I was like, no, okay, let's do what you're prepared to do. So we're in the park and she's praying over me. And we had been out there for probably about 4 hours at this point. And someone walks over and asks if, what we were doing. And he asked if I wanted to practice on him. And so I start doing what she taught me to do. And I started getting all this information about his wife and his daughter. So I'm asking the woman, can I talk? Because Reiki is typically silent, And she said, of course. And so I was talking the entire time. I was touching his body. And when we were done, he said, you are exactly right. How do you know all of that? And I told him I had no idea. I had never even done that until that very moment. And for years, I didn't even know what to call it. I didn't know the word clairtangent. So I would tell people, oh, it's like Reiki, but I'm talking.
I love this. I used to give Reiki professionally. I was paid for it. there were so many times, not always, but so many times I wanted to talk and say, oh my God, can you feel this?
Yes.
Or I'm feeling this. Does it have to do with this? But I never did because I was paid for Reiki.
Yes.
So fascinating.
I think so many Reiki practitioners are likely clairtangent, or potentially clairsentient, which is clear feeling. I've even had massage therapists give me information about my grandfather from the massage, So I think people who do like touch work in general definitely have other abilities and they may not know about it.
Right. I'm so grateful that you took the time to explain that. I also want to talk a little bit about your community service. This is obviously for the podcast.
Yes.
But I am also going to include this on my mentorship platform. I have a platform called Engaged Mentorship, which is a place where, a few hundred people hang out. We meet once a month on a live virtual gathering, and it's for householders, professionals, everyone in between, creatives. But I'm moving in my own work toward more charitable, volunteer, organizational, nonprofit work.
Nice.
And that was part of your bio that also struck me and drew me in to read and invite you here, because you've been passionate about this work and you've worked with nonprofits for the last 13 years as a development consultant. And I would love to know, both for our podcast listener and for our mentorship listener, what that means exactly and how you work.
So currently, how I work with nonprofits is I support them in fundraising. Development basically means fundraising. And there are several tentacles to fundraising, from philanthropic foundations to individual giving to events. There are lots of ways people give. So I support, organizations in raising money for their missions.
Amazing. I think this is going to be relevant to at least one person in mentorship, so I'm excited about it. Your missions, organizations are mostly targeting social justice, pediatric healthcare, and equitable education. Can you share with us a little more about these organizations with which you're working?
Yes, for sure. They're all doing so amazing things. I feel so honored to be able to work for them, because they're doing such powerful things. One is it's a housing and criminal justice organization in the Hudson Valley, and they are employed by formerly incarcerated people, and they advocate for housing justice for people who were, formerly incarcerated. The other is a organization that is in New York City that serves children, from 0 to 18 in various capacities around getting pediatric care. And they really focus on underserved populations as well, because there's so much inequity in everything. But even in pediatric healthcare, it is shocking how many children from lower income communities don't get the same access to healthcare, And so
Wow.
they focus on that. And then I've also done all kinds of things with advocacy organizations for Muslim public service, autism. I kind of have worked with a spectrum of organizations. I let my intuition really tell me who I should work for. I like my intuition guides everything. So even that.
Right, right. And you now live in Brooklyn, correct?
Correct.
And you founded a volunteer-led organization also, which teaches people living in Brownsville about the importance of incorporating plant-based eating into their diet. Can you teach us more about that?
Yes, for sure. And I miss that work so much. I don't do that work anymore. I dissolved that work in 2016. I did that from about 2009 to 2016. And at that time, I was strictly vegan, also raw a lot of the time. And I just recognized the health benefits, of eating well. My late dad was also suffering from a lot of health issues. He was diabetic at the time. And, he was getting dialysis multiple days a week. He had congestive heart failure. So all of these things were happening in his life. And I was constantly working with him to manage as much as he could through his diet. So it was just really natural to me. And my dad is also the same person who gave me my very first book about vegan eating, which was when I was in high school. He gave me this book by Harvey and Marilyn Diamond called Fit for Life. And so, he knew all the things to do, but he didn't do them. He was not vegan, was definitely a big meat eater. So, yeah, it was kind of a combination of things happening in my personal life and in my professional life that led me to start this organization because of all the things that were happening. No one was teaching people how to eat. And in so many brown communities, I know how important it is to know how to eat because people are dying prematurely just because they don't know how to eat, you know? And so I was in Brownsville teaching people about a plant based diet and making Brazil nut milk for them and mock salmon with carrots and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of things
Mm-hmm.
from foods that they had in their neighborhood and that they could make at home in their own kitchens. I just learned so much about how the grocery system works, and it's just crazy. I mean, there were people in Brownsville who they're paying full price for an overripe tomato, and they believe that, that is the natural behavior of a tomato. So when they get home and the tomato the next day starts to mold, they don't have money to waste. So they no longer buy fresh food because they don't know that the produce at their grocery store is already overripe. So there are just so many like little nuanced things that are maintaining ill health in Black and Brown communities. And so I really wanted to do that work for that reason. Yeah, it was really heartbreaking, but I loved it so much. I loved it so much. And I was doing it voluntarily, and I was giving children like 6 and 7 years old their very first blueberry, their first red pepper, their first avocado. So it was just so fulfilling for me.
Wow,
Yeah.
sister. Thank you for that. That's just not in the deck right now. It's just not possible for you.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like such a good way to spend a little bit of time. I might start doing it here in Santa Fe.
Yeah. And it doesn't cost a lot of money, And I was also focusing on people's spiritual awareness because my real reason for starting that organization was a spiritual reason. And it was because I know the power that food has over our spiritual life. And so I wanted to use plant-based diet as a way to kind of support people spiritually as well,
Yeah, beautiful. It's interesting. I'm just learning from my own blood work that I have to incorporate some meat into my diet. I'm very happy eating vegetables forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have an opinion about it. I know there's two very, very clear sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's this, it's that. I just have to eat a little bit of meat. But I will tell you that my digestion and my mental clarity when I was vegan and also raw went through the roof. I think that's something to do for periods of time. If you're listening and you're like, I can't do that. It's like, yeah, I get it. And maybe it's something to consider for a moment of your life, for a week, for a cleanse, something to think about because the plants in their raw form hold so much prana and life force.
Absolutely.
So I'm feeling what you're saying.
And I'm the same way. I now eat meat occasionally because I was anemic for a long time and didn't know it. My hair was thinning. My nails that are usually claws were not growing, so all these weird things were happening. And so I learned I was anemic. And so I just had to incorporate red meat, which is actually my favorite.
Yeah, I'm so happy for you. I'm learning. I'm trying to get there. I'm like bison chili,
Yes.
doing my damnedest to enjoy the flavor. It's hard for me, but I'm getting there. I have a couple of other things that I wanted to talk to you about, mostly your current practices, what you're doing with your clients, how you're working with them. As part of the mentorship, I love featuring women who have, really gone for it and made a life and a business and are able to sustain themselves doing what it is that they were trained to do and what they love. And I think equally for the podcast, this is inspiring for our listener today. Here's an example of a woman who has taken her life into her own hands and created a thriving business doing what she is meant to do. So I would love to hear a little about that.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for that because it's definitely been a journey, and it started probably in 2009 when I started the nonprofit organization, when I was fired from a job for the first and last time in life. And
yeah, that only has to happen once.
It only has to happen once. And I think the first maybe 12 to 24 hours, I was kind of freaking out. Like, what am I going to do? And then I pulled myself together and I was like, you know what? I'm not actually going to get another job. And I, was not financially sound at the time. I was just following what was true for me, which was incredibly scary. However, I knew I could do it because I just did. And so I did not look for another job and I started to consult as a development consultant. And at the same time, I was also starting this nonprofit organization that I did not take a salary from. And so I needed something to sustain my income in some way. And I needed freedom over my hours so that I could be in Brownsville and be at public schools at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it kind of all meshed together. And I had this big image for what I wanted to have happen. And I made it happen. I made both of those things happen. So I just trusted myself. I trusted myself, which is a whole task in and of itself.
Well, there are a couple of caveats, I think, for our listener. Both of us grew up with parents who really supported us, by and large.
Yes, absolutely.
That's rare. That's exceedingly, exceedingly rare. So putting that on the plate, as it were, there are certain advantages that come with that, which mostly involves a sense of self-trust because we were trusted. And we had parents who were relatively trustworthy, which eliminates like a mile of 5-foot tall hurdles that most people have to jump, and some of them never even do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so interesting to hear you say that because I think about my journey from healing from trauma, and so much of that was also about my ability to trust myself, because I
Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, because I self-healed, I was able to put myself in a mental and emotional state that caused me to go through depression and was really difficult. And, by the grace of God, I pulled myself out of depression and was able to look at this thing that I needed to deal with that I had never dealt with, and all the ways the trauma was playing out in my life in ways that, may not obviously be connected to the trauma, but literally everything in my life was connected to the trauma. And so I never understood that my ability to do that came from the trust that I had from my parents. So thank you for offering that to me. I'm always studying myself.
Yeah. It's interesting to look and see that despite some of the hardships that I'm sure both of us endured, that is a great source of strength.
Yes.
That lives in us cellularly.
Yep.
Would it be okay to talk about the trauma that you endured? Is that something that we can talk about, or would you rather skip over that?
We can absolutely talk about it.
Okay. I've found myself as an interviewer kind of skirting around such things, and I decided a few weeks ago that on my upcoming interviews, I am going to ask the harder questions.
I love that. Yes, that's
Yes.
all the meat. More meat. Not all of it,
Yes.
but there's more meat there.
There is. I think that our listener, if you're ready to listen, and you're ready to speak, Ebony, I think our listener would be interested to hear what you did endure.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a rape survivor. And I really think it's important that more people speak that because it's so common. And my rape resulted in a pregnancy that I aborted. And so, that's like another layer of the trauma. And then on top of that, I repressed it for a very long time, which is another common response to rape that a lot of people do. And repression is different from suppression. And I always like to be really clear about the difference because one is mental, one is emotional, one is conscious, one is subconscious, right? So repression, it's a mental defense mechanism. So I wasn't capable of acknowledging the fact that this horrible thing happened to me and that I now had to deal with it. And so the mind pushes the memory of that thing away from you as if it didn't happen. However, I was still acting out, mostly in my romantic relationships with men. I ran, I was not able to experience emotional intimacy. And suppression is when you're doing it consciously and it is emotional. So, a good example of suppression is when you don't want to let yourself cry. You're aware that the tears are about to fall. Maybe, you're in a scenario where crying is not appropriate or you think crying is not appropriate. And so you purposefully don't let yourself cry. So I always like to explain that those two things are very different because oftentimes people get them confused.
Right. just giving myself a little bit of empathy here, and you.
Thank you.
Yeah. How old were you at the time?
25.
Yeah.
And had just started having sex. It was my friend's brother. And I was a virgin until I was about 21. And so sex was very new for me.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Yeah. Rape is really interesting what it does, or trauma, I will say in general, because in hindsight, when I look at my life, it's so interesting to see all the ways that the trauma plays out. It plays out in how I manage friendships, just relationships of all kind, the amount of money you allow yourself to generate. Like there's so many things that experiencing trauma tells you about yourself that are not true. That are not true. But it takes time for you to understand that these things are not true. And you're operating with the belief that even though you will consciously and logically know these things aren't true, it still gets in there somewhere. This very strong message of who you are because of what you've experienced.
Dude, the thing that you passed through a little while ago where you said that one would even limit one's capacity to earn and be successful, whatever that means, whether it's monetary or otherwise, because of trauma, really touched me just now.
Yeah, it affects every part of your life. And that's why the healing journey is so intense and so deep, because literally everything changes. And also why it's so beautiful, and also why it's so scary, because literally everything changes. You become aware of all the ways, the negative messaging that you told yourself that maybe you only told to yourself. There may be people who know you very well who you've never spoken these things to, because on such a deep level of your own awareness and relationship with you, that it may not come out of your mouth. It may never come out of your mouth. However, you are acting on it constantly. And it really takes, someone that has a really strong sense of self-awareness to even notice it, which is why it's so important to talk about it.
Wow. I'm really glad you shared this. I have one follow-up question, which is, how did you deal with your friend and how did you deal with your perpetrator?
Yes. So I ended my friendship with her over something really small. So she borrowed a pair of pants of mine without asking me, because at that time I was living with a roommate. We were all friends living in this house near Howard University. And, she would come over when I wasn't there to see the other friend. And so she came into my room, into my closet, and took a pair of pants that she wanted to borrow, and she didn't ask me. And for that reason, I ended my friendship with her and didn't speak to her again until, oh, wow, what year was that? It was somewhere around 2012. So that had to have been a good 10 years, later, when she reached out to me. She found me somehow online and reached out to me to tell me about a mutual friend of ours that died.
Whew.
And of course, I never saw him again because I never saw her again. I only saw
I'm like biting cuticles right now. Then what happened?
when she called me on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I hadn't unrepressed the trauma. So it didn't even dawn on me to say anything to her because I hadn't consciously acknowledged it to myself.
Wow. Then what?
Then what? So the way I process my healing from trauma and my ability to unrepress, because unrepressing is so unusual that it's not even a word, right? It's a word I use because it's my truth. But if you look at the dictionary, there is no word for that. And I remember meeting James Gordon in person at this book event here in New York City at the Open Center years ago. And he's a Ivy School educated, like, trauma therapist, and he talks a lot about healing and transformation. And I remember asking him what led me to unrepress my trauma. And I told him what I had been doing for years. I had been, started doing yoga, which put me in my body in a very different way, which was very powerful for me. I would be crying after yoga class and had no idea why. And I started really getting into crystal therapy and meditation. And he said that there's a conversation that the mind and body are constantly having. It's called a connatural conversation. and that I created a pathway by doing the yoga and the meditation and the crystal therapy. It created a pathway for my mind and body to have a more honest conversation with each other. And that's how I was able to unrepress it. And those things were happening for several years before 2016. I'm on the phone with a friend, and it was either Thanksgiving or the day before Thanksgiving. And he's talking about his trauma and some things that he had experienced. And I just literally said out of my mouth, that I was raped and had an abortion. And until that very moment, it had not come out of my mouth. And then the real healing began because I processed all the things that got me to acknowledging it consciously as also my part of my healing journey. I just didn't know what was happening, or why these things were happening. And some examples of those things are I retreated from my social circle. I was a pretty social, outgoing person before, and I just stopped. I said no to every invitation. I would be at home for 4 days at a time, not leaving the house. I was depressed. I definitely went through a state of depression. So all those things were happening before I actually said it out of my mouth. And then, so once I said it out of my mouth, then I was conscious that I needed to deal with this. I started going to therapy. I started to consciously do all the things, from spiritual things to practical things, to make sure that I was taking really good care of myself.
Beautiful how you started to prepare the field prior to even saying it out loud. And that's probably what led you to say it out loud, in fact.
I think 100% that's what led me to. And it's so interesting to me that my spirit guided me in that really beautiful way. And that's why I talk about intuitive healing, because, I just listened to myself. I was doing things that I'd never done before, things that were uncomfortable, things that didn't make sense, and sometimes didn't even want to do. But the desire for me to do them was so strong that I listened and I did them.
I love the fact also that you're such a good listener to your body, to your spirit, to your emotional body. And that's why it's easier to talk about it now. And do you have any plans to get in touch with that friend ever again?
I haven't thought about getting in touch with her, but I thought about getting in touch with him.
Fascinating.
I definitely thought about him. And what came up for me when I thought about that years ago, because a friend of mine said to me, early on in my healing journey, this is like during the Me Too movement that time, and, so many people were being called out for rape. And a friend of mine said to me, are you going to reach out to him? Are you going to tell him? Because I can find him if I want to. This is from my high school life. There are people I still associate with from high school. I could find him. And at that time, my response was, oh, hell no. I have nothing to say to him, because it was just so uncomfortable. And I don't even know if I had forgiven him at that time. I have since absolutely forgiven him. And this is going to sound odd, but I'm even grateful to him for the experience that he gave me. And it's not the experience of rape and abortion. It's the experience of getting to know myself through having to heal from rape and abortion. So I've learned to be thankful to him. And it makes me emotional because it's such a huge gift that I get to have. And I know it's a very odd way to see trauma and to see rape, but that's how I see it.
I don't think it's odd at all. And I think our listener, if they've had any experience here, is probably having a little burst of opening in their heart, like I am in some way. I'm not telling you or asking you or anything, but I dare say you might even give him a gift.
Absolutely.
By reaching out. I would love, if you don't mind, to just give me a high sign if and when you do that. I would love to hear, and if you want to practice on me, whatever, I would love to be knowing about that and holding that for you.
Thank you for offering that. It's so beautiful that you get it, because
I really get it.
I've had a fear that people wouldn't understand, right? They wouldn't get it. But having that level of understanding and awareness has just expanded my consciousness on so many levels. And it's made me understand dark and light differently. And it's just been such an amazing, eye-opening thing. And, I haven't thought about reaching out to him in a while. So I'm glad you're bringing this up for me, because Yeah, I haven't thought about it in a while. I have thought about like what I would potentially say, and I've thought about his negative reaction, but I haven't thought about like how he could positively respond. I've only thought about him being horrible and just making it more hurtful.
I hear you. This is not a judgment at all. And
Yes.
I realize that we're having this conversation for other ears, but I'm feeling comfortable, and I just want you to know this.
Yes.
I dare say that your nervous laughter will end the moment you reach out to him and say, I want to start this moment of contact by telling you that I deeply and fully forgive you. And I would love to, whatever the amount of contact, talk on the phone or whatever, who knows what would be serving you.
Yeah.
I keep looking for places where I can let go of my opinions about things, even in traumatic situations, not quite rape, but other things. And to start there is to make the other person feel safe enough to continue the healing with you. And working with incarcerated folks, as I do now, in several different ways, to start with forgiveness.
Yeah.
To start with treating them like humans who fucked up, who made a terrible, 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 terrible mistake at the expense of so much life and freedom. To start there is very healing for all of us. Those ripples are so far.
It's so true. And I know everything you're saying is true. And these are all thoughts I've had. I just haven't done it. I've gone through various stages of, the forgiveness because I didn't forgive him right away. Initially, I was so angry. I thought if I ever saw him, I would want to cause physical pain to him, something comparable to the pain he's caused me. That was my initial. And then over time, it was like, oh, this is this incredible gift. Like, thank you, and the forgiveness came really easy once I got to that place. So, yeah, I'll have to spend some time with myself and think about that because I have the courage to do it. And it's just a matter of doing it.
Yep. I did not expect to go here at all in this conversation. I feel like I've definitely made a new friend, and I'm seriously at your disposal anytime you feel like you need some support where it's not somebody close to you. I will happily spend any length of time with you as a gift to all the women in this world. To help you craft that conversation and structure the dialogue, and whenever the time is right, even if it's in 10 years from now.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel like it's sooner rather than later. So, you may be hearing from me before you expect to, but yeah,
I'm right here.
I mean, I'm definitely ready to rid my nervous laugh. I notice it. I've noticed it for years, and I even had a conversation with myself one day about like intentionally not laughing, but I was like, no, it's natural for me at this stage to do that. So I'm just going to do it. So
Yes.
however it comes out, it comes out,
And you know what? It heals the person you're talking to. When you laugh, I feel a lightness. I feel your smile, and it makes me smile over here, even though we can't see each other.
That's good to know.
But I can sense it's a bit of extra energy that you're expending.
Yeah, it definitely is.
In uncomfortable moments.
It definitely is. And initially, when I would tell people who I love about my trauma, they got so upset and they cried. And so I didn't want to tell people so then they make them cry or make them feel bad for me or, sad for me in any way, because I really am good, and I just didn't want anybody to have like pity on me and so I was always conscious of how I told someone because I was worried about how they would feel.
Which leads us down a whole nother rabbit hole of hey, guess what? We don't make anyone feel anything. They bring their experience. Like I was crying when you were telling me and you were still laughing.
Yeah.
Like you were trying to lighten my load and I was still crying.
Yeah.
Bless you.
That's a way of being that's been with me my whole life that I always have to be mindful of.
Adaptation.
I'm so extremely sensitive to other people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I grew up like that too. I had a sister who wasn't well for some time. She's totally fine now and awesome. But she wasn't well during our early childhood, and it was a thing. I am definitely a highly sensitive human because of it. So I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot possibly thank you enough for diving in with me and with our listener today in this way, Ebony.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to dive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't wait to see how this all unfolds and to watch your formation and your growth, your evolution. I know you have plenty of clients at this point, but I would love to share with our listener where they can find you in case they want to consider working with you.
Yeah, sure. So I have a website, which is just my name, Ebony, Eboni Banks.me. And then my Instagram. I'm always posting information about intuition and various ways of accessing intuition on my Instagram because I credit my intuition with my ability to heal myself.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually think I might need to ask one last question.
Absolutely.
Website is Ebony Banks, Ebony with an I. Instagram, Intuitive Ebony Writes, Ebony with an I. The last question is this. If you were having to make an elevator pitch in New York with somebody on an elevator who really did not understand what intuition means and really wanted to understand it, what would you tell them as you're going from the 3rd to the 60th floor?
I would tell them that intuition is the most intelligent part of all of us that connects us to the creator. And the more we tap into our intuition, the more we're able to receive our true power.
Wow. And if we have no idea how to start, where would we start?
Oh, that's such a good question. I would say spending time alone.
Like you did.
Yeah, absolutely. Spend time alone as often as you can, wherever you can, in the shower, in the car, wherever you can, and become more aware of all the inner dialogue that is going on inside of you. Not just a dialogue, but the whole world, your entire inner world. It's as abundant and seductive and colorful as the world that your eyes see.
Discursive thinking is the bane of our existence. It keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Like literally 3 times in the last 2 days.
Wow.
The vitality of solitude and the poison of unnecessary discursive thinking.
Yes.
Ugh.
However, I'm not just referring to thinking, though. I also focus a lot on feeling. I mean, the body communicates so much that can really help us to minimize all the things that are not true that our brain is telling us. For example, the night before, I was really stressed out about something, and I kept thinking about the thing that was stressing me out, and my right shoulder was so tense. And as soon as I noticed that what my shoulder was telling me, I decided to change what I was thinking. And so, as soon as I changed what I was thinking, my shoulder relaxed. My shoulder completely relaxed. And so, the way that we feel inside our body is equally as important as what we're thinking and what's happening in the mind. We have to access more of our body than just the mind. We have so much to access.
That is a perfect way to end this. I want to figure out how to write this blurb with our listener. So far, I think what it's going to be is on the importance of self-trust, repression versus suppression, which I was very fascinated by, the vitality of solitude for the development of our intuition, and something about our capacity to attune to our feelings.
Yes. In our bodies. Yes.
Rather than prioritize our feelings over our thinking mind.
Absolutely. That is the golden nugget.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times this has come up. I cannot thank you enough for affirming this.
I love that.
Wow. And I also have a right shoulder. So I literally have a right shoulder thing. And I'm just relaxing my mind right now for it. I wish you grace and ease and deep clarity and friendship and happiness. I am so happy to know you, Ebony, and I really reiterate that I'm available should you want to talk to a relative stranger when the time comes to deliver that message to that poor man.
Okay. I'm going to really sit with that because I'm ready. So
Amazing. Amazing.
thank you so much for offering that to me. Oh, that's so powerful.
Of course. And to our listener, thanks for listening in on this very personal conversation. It's very different than most of our other podcasts. I'm really happy to have done it, though, and I'm happy to feel a shift in my own understanding of what's possible in these conversations. And thank you for going to visit with Ebony online, Ebony Banks, Ebony with an I.me, and Intuitive Ebony Writes on Instagram. And again, that's Ebony with an I. Thank you, dear Ebony. You are a gift to all of us today and every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.